Good morning and welcome to this Birmingham Tech Week talk. And thank you to Tech Nation, West Midlands Growth Company and Department for International Trade. And also to our 2020 sponsors, NatWest, Copper, Culture Group, BJSS, Side Trade and BMJ, I think it is. And also our 2020 partners. And Birmingham Tech Week is proudly supported by Click Travel. And this talk is in memory of my late wife, Sonia Mills, who died 3 years ago today. So the talk is called Home Assistant, the Swiss Army knife of home automation. So sit back and enjoy the ride. So what is Home Assistant exactly? Sounds like this guy, right? No, not him, he's Homer Simpson. It's actually open source, written in Python, and it runs on a Raspberry Pi. I mean, I recommend a Pi 4. It does work on the Pi 3, but it's a bit slower. It'll run on lots of different hardware as well, such as like PC hardware, but I prefer running it on the Pi. It puts local control and privacy first. The data is stored locally, not in the cloud, and it will track all the state of all your different IoT devices throughout your home. And it supports an absolute shed ton of devices. So if I click on the link, it should bring up the list of all the different integrations that it supports. There's 1,700 now, so about 50 or so more since I last did the slide. All sorts of different sorts of things. Right, let's get this working again. That's back good. It also supports advanced automation rules. So for example, I've got a rule that when a burglar alarm sensor gets triggered, it stops the music playing, it gets the Mycroft voice assistant to say a message saying the burglar alarm countdown has started, then it waits 30 seconds and it triggers the burglar alarm. I mean, that's simplified, it does other things as well, but that's just an example. It's very extensible and customizable. So there's a community store where you can install plugins that other people have written on GitHub. It'll also integrate with HTTP and REST APIs. So you can write your own APIs that will communicate with it. And you can also write your own plugins in Python if you want to as well. So it is one system to rule them all. So rather than like having a gazillion different phone apps for each different device, so you've got like the Philips Hue home like phone app, you might have your SmartThings phone app. You just need Home Assistant to control everything. So it really does give you the power. So it's quite easy to install. You just download the disk image from the website, flash it onto your micro SD card, e.g. using Etcher, put the SD card into your Pi, power it up, and then you're ready to enjoy. And so it's very easy to get set up quickly and easily. So there's an onboarding process where you just enter your user account details for the account you want to create. You then enter the location of your home, so it's quite easy to find it on a map. And whether you're on metric or imperial units, and then you can choose some integrations to set up out of the box. I think it'll detect things like Philips Hue, etc., and Google Cast on your network automatically, so it does a lot of that sort of setup for you. And then once you've done that, you should see a default user interface. This is just the one that's like nicked from their website. So you've got like a weather forecast, and then it's got your user account. It's called Awesome User at the top. It's also tracking the sunrise and sunset, which can be used for various things. And if you then click configuration from the left-hand bar and go on to integrations, you should then see the integrations that were auto-discovered. And you can also set up further integrations just by clicking that orange icon in the bottom right. So you get those like for free without having to configure any YAML, because Home Assistant also uses YAML for more like advanced configuration. So these are the ones that I've got running on my instance. So I've got a Brother printer. I'm getting carbon intensity data from a feed. I've got Google Cast. I've got the Home Assistant community store for the community plugins, etc. I've got Met Office for the weather. I've got a Mosquito MQTT broker for Owntracks for person tracking. I've got Philips Hue, and I've got SmartThings. So everything in Home Assistant has a type associated with it. So it could be a light bulb, and with light bulbs, you've got like different aspects of it are supported. So if it's a very simple light bulb, it might just switch on and off. it could dim, and if it's a posher light bulb, you can tweak colours. Then there's a switch. So in my case, I've got some electrical switches that I can turn on and off. A media player, so it could be a music player or video. An alarm, a camera, such as CCTV, a sensor, so for example, like reading temperature and humidity, a calendar. So I've got a Google Calendar integration, which announces 2 minutes before I've got a meeting. Notification. Right, somebody's joined, so let's see if I can let them in. Yeah, bit of a latecomer. Morning, hi. And presence detection, that detects if a person is in the house or not. And then finally, like weather forecast, so you can link to the Met Office or whatever. So everything in Home Assistant also has a name, and that's really important for when we come on to automate things, because you need to know the name of the thing to be able to like write automations with it. So there's also add-ons, which are extras that you can install that run in Docker containers. So this is the list of ones that I've got. Just need to let somebody else in. So if I then go back to a different window, I'll show you what I've got up and running. So I'll go on to Supervisor, and then this lists all the different plugins. So for example, I could go to Terminal, and that gives me an SSH terminal that I can then use to like run various Linux commands, etc. So back to the slides. And if you want to do more complex configuration, then there's you can do YAML configuration files, and I've got gazillions of these. So I mean, this is just a screenshot of some of the configuration files that I've got, because I've just like been doing this in my spare time for a couple of years or so. And user interface is called Lovelace, and by default, Home Assistant will manage that for you. So I'll just show you the user interface. So what I've got set up, so I've got like various tabs. So you've got like a display of just like the default sets, like for the home, that's got all like the switches and the lights, and then you've got security for the burglar alarm, CCTV, and it's tracking energy usage. There's weather forecast, etc. There's the music that's playing in the lounge, so you've got stuff in the lounge, conservatory that I'm in, the kitchen, big bedroom, little bedroom, etc. So let's go back to the Zoom. So by default, it manages it for you, but you can take control yourself and just like write your own user interface files in YAML. So that's what I did, and that was what I was showing you just now. Just need to let somebody else in. Right. So an example user interface configuration file is the one for the big bedroom. So you've got, it splits it into, you've got like an entity display. So that just displays the bedside table lamp, that's a Philips Hue lamp. And then there's a media player. And then there's temperature and humidity sensor. So that's just like showing a graph of how that was over time, and also like the current values. So I think it's 20.5 degrees and about 56% humidity. And I'm going to show you the Home Assistant community store now. That is where you can install community plugins from GitHub. So in my case, I've got something to control the Philips Ambilight television, which I've not actually done much with yet. There's garbage collection for showing me when the next bin collection is. Multiple Mycroft, that is to use more than one Mycroft voice assistant throughout the house. Then there's the carbon intensity feed, and then the DMX lighting that I'm going to come on to shortly. So if I just show you that page now. So we go on to hacks. And so it looks like there's a new version of the garbage collection card that I'll update later. And then there's integrations, and that is like third-party integrations that people have written to like various devices. So like Volkswagen, Solar, Sprinkler. Just need to let somebody else in. think they're just about to join. And then there's also like front-end integrations that you can add that other people have written. And so an example of one of those that I've got running on my system is on the weather page. If I can get rid of all these Zoom things that keep popping up. There is the sun view, and that will show you the time of sunrise and where the sun is in the sky. The time of like the solar maximum, so today that's 12:51, and then the time of sunset, that's 11 minutes past 6. So one of the custom integrations that I've got working is DMX lighting. So in my conservatory where I am now, there are some American DJ disco lights, and I've got open lighting architecture running on another Raspberry Pi, and that will talk ArtNet over the network, and that is a protocol for controlling lights using UDP messages. And so there's a screenshot of like what the OLA application looks like. And in the YAML configuration, you just add a light for the DMX platform. You give it the IP address of the Pi that it's running on, and then you tell it what the devices are. So I've got 4 devices. They are ADJ Mega Tripod Profile Plus lights. They're actually RGB WUV, so red, green, blue, and ultraviolet. So if I go to conservatory, I can view each light. So I can click on that, and I can tweak the color of various lights. So it should start having some funky colors on me. So let's make another one green. And finally, let's have like an orange color. And then I can do things like dimming the light. So I could just like go to the turquoise color, and I could just reduce the brightness on the turquoise. So it's got rid of the turquoise light, and I could like just tweak the light intensity. I'm not going to do any UV because I've actually got the UV channel mapped to white on this. I mean, that's just an example of being able to like integrate Home Assistant with something completely different. So it's not just like Philips Hue lights, it's like DMX, which is like quite advanced sort of DJ stuff. So notifications, so that is when something has happened in the system that you're interested in, and you want to be notified. So there's shed loads of things that Home Assistant can send you notifications to. So if I just go onto that list of integrations, AWS is one of them, Apple, BMW, Facebook Messenger, Google Hangouts, all sorts of different things it'll send notifications to. But I use Mycroft, which is an open source voice assistant, and the Telegram app on my phone. So with Mycroft has got a concept of skills, and you can install skills on your Mycroft devices. So there's a Home Assistant skill. So you can then tell Mycroft to turn various lights on, etc., and sockets. I'm not going to demonstrate that because it's Mycroft's a bit flaky, but it does work. But if you want to send a message back to Mycroft to tell it that something's happened, then you can use a notification integration to talk back to the Mycroft message bus, and that runs on each Mycroft on port 8181. But you need to go onto Mycroft via SSH and open port 8181 on the firewall so that you can then talk to the message bus on that port. But by default, Home Assistant only supports talking to one Mycroft. I've got 3 of them. So I created a plugin in Python to talk to multiple Mycrofts, and I've got that running across the house. So I've got 3 different Mycrofts on 3 different IP addresses. So I don't know what this will sound like, but I'm going to do it anyway. I've got my list of automations, which I'm going to come on to later. And so one of them might be that the back door's been opened. So So if I execute that,
has been opened.
did you hear that? It's Mycroft said back door has been opened. I'll do that again.
Back door has been opened.
So hopefully you heard Mycroft say the back door was opened. Right, I need to move the list of people up. So with Telegram, you can also get Home Assistant to talk to a Telegram bot. And that's really useful for when you're out of the house and you want to get notifications on your phone when something related to security has happened especially. So there's a Telegram integration and it's quite easy to configure in the YAML configuration. So it's on the polling platform and you just give it the API key of your Telegram bot and also the chat IDs for any phones that you want to send messages to. So I've got my partner's phone and my phone running on that. And an example of some of the Telegram messages that you might get. So if the doorbell goes off, it'll tell you somebody's at the door. It'll tell you when the front door's been opened. And it'll tell you things about the burglar alarm. So when you've turned the burglar alarm on and off, and if a sensor has triggered the countdown, which gives you 30 seconds to disarm the burglar alarm. So now we're going to talk about automations, automating all the things. So for each automation, you give it an alias, and that is the name of the automation that you want to do, and that's mandatory. You give it a trigger, and that tells it to trigger when something happens in the system, and that could be like lots and lots of different things. So it could be that a burglar alarm sensor's been triggered, or somebody's pressed the doorbell, or even like the temperature in a room has dropped below a certain level. And you can also have like templates for various things happening. Then there's condition. So once it's triggered, it will only run the automation if the list of conditions has also happened. That's optional. So by default, if you don't give it conditions, then it will always run when the thing's been triggered. But if you add conditions, then those conditions have to be met as well. Then there's a mode, and that is telling you what to do if there's multiple things happening at the same time. So your automation's already running, and that trigger happens again. So for example, if somebody's repeatedly pressing the doorbell. So there's different modes. So single mode is where it just ignores any subsequent triggers. Restart is where if it's already running, it'll just restart from the beginning. Queued is where it will just queue up further requests to run the automation. And then parallel is where it just runs multiple automations in parallel. That is optional, and I think it defaults to single. Then max is the maximum number of runs for queued and parallel automations, which defaults to 10. And then the action is what to do when that trigger's been executed and the conditions have been met. So you've always got to add at least one action, but you can add multiple actions as well. And then there's other nice stuff. So you can have Boolean expressions for your conditions. So by default, if you give it a list of conditions, they will be and. So all those conditions have got to be met before it runs. But you can also have or and not conditions in there. So for example, I might want to trigger the burglar alarm if it's in when any of the armed states, armed away, armed home, or armed night. And then you've got loops. So you've got like repeat, while, until loops. So an example automation is the doorbell. So it receives an event from when the doorbell's pressed, and that is single mode. And there's a reason for that, because we don't want to be bombarded with Telegram notifications when somebody's pressing the doorbell multiple times. So that will turn on a script to pause the music and notify Telegram and the Mycrofts. So scripts are a way of just factoring out common tasks that you do lots and lots of times, and you want to call those from different automation. Somebody else is joining? Yeah. So they should join in a tick. So that will send a message to Mycroft to say that there's somebody at the door, and it will also send a telegram message, and then it will also sound a buzzer in the big bedroom and in the kitchen. And the delay at the end, 5 seconds, that's called a cool down. So that is so that if somebody presses the doorbell multiple times, there's a 5-second wait before it will allow it to trigger again. So that leads nicely onto 433 megahertz remote control. And I use a lot of these devices around the house because they're quite cheap. So you can get things like the Loitron MIP doorbell and various security type sensors like magnetic door sensors and the passive infrared sensors. And then you can get a 433 megahertz receiver module. I think they're about £4 from Amazon. Somebody else is joining. Hopefully that'll work. And then you can get a transmitter that's about £3 from Amazon as well. And that'll let you transmit these codes. And then you've got, you can get quite nice burglar alarm sirens from banggood.com. I've got a few of those. And then also the Mercury remote control sockets from Amazon as well. So I've got a Raspberry Pi that controls all of this. So it receives, each sensor sends out a unique code, and the Pi listens for those, and then it can also transmit codes as well. So I've got Apache running on one of the Pis, and that will let me send an HTTP request to transmit a code. I use something called 433utils. So that's an open source project on GitHub that will receive and transmit the 433 megahertz codes from the Pi. It runs on a couple of old Pis here. So I've got a Pi upstairs called GCHQ that listens for and transmits the codes. Then there's another Pi downstairs called Alexandra Palace, and that just transmits. And then there's a Pi 3 called HAL in the hall, and that's got a transmitter inside it. So I've got multiple Pis for and failover. Hopefully this person will join. I think they're here. Right, sorry about that. But they receive each CPU for breakfast, so you have to be quite careful which Pis you run it on. Because I did try running it on a Pi upstairs that is in the bedroom, but it was using so much CPU that it stopped other things from working on it. So in the end, I didn't bother running it on that. So this is the script that receives the codes. It calls something called RF sniffer, and that is really useful for if you've got a new device that you want to get the code from, you can run RF sniffer and that'll just print out the code for that device. And then when it's received this script, when it's received a code, it will transmit that code to Home Assistant via a REST call. And then it will just, it's in a while true loop, so it'll just keep on running, waiting for the next code, and then transmitting that back to Home Assistant. So then there's an automation set up for receiving an HTTP request from that Pi when a code's been received. And then that's just got a list of the various possible codes that it can receive, that it understands. And I've got that. So there's a secrets file that's not in Git that's got a list of all the different codes. So that's never in Git, so that just in case anybody hacks GitHub, they can't get all like the codes for the burglar alarm. Then this is the script that runs in a CGI script on Apache on that Pi that will do the transmission. So that will receive the code, which is like the numeric code to transmit. The protocol is optional because there's different protocols for transmitting these codes. Some devices might work with one protocol but not another. And then some devices are quite fussy as to the length of each pulse in milliseconds, like the sockets. So the sockets need it to be a particular length in milliseconds or else it won't work. So that script gets called from Home Assistant when it needs to transmit a code for like turning a socket on or off or setting the burglar alarm off. And so this is the automation of the start of it that sends the codes. So that will receive an event when there's a request to send a code, and it'll work out which code it needs to send, and it will send it. So for the burglar alarm, it sends it both to GCHQ upstairs and Alexandra Palace downstairs. So you've got that failover and redundancy built in. So I don't know if anybody knows the TV show Look Around You, but this character is very protective of his synthesizers. And as a musician, so am I. So in an ideal world, I'd have this sort of automation for protecting the music stuff, where as soon as a burglar gets detected, a Dalek gets dispatched to exterminate the burglar. But unfortunately, that isn't possible. I mean, for starters, I'd get arrested for murder or whatever. So instead, I've got a burglar alarm, and that's very easy to configure in a Home Assistant. You just set up this alarm control panel of type manual, and then you've got this quite straightforward configuration. You give it like the arming time, the delay time, the trigger time, etc. So the arming time and the delay time are 0 by default, but the trigger time of 120 seconds means that after the alarm sounding for 2 minutes, it goes back to the previous state. So it's quite complex, the setup that I've got. So there's all the different sensors that can trigger the alarm. It's like door sensors and glass break sensors and a motion sensor. But I can turn these on and off individually as required. So if I'm in the conservatory, then I'll disable the conservatory door sensor, which I've done today because I'm in the conservatory. And you can also turn on and off alarm actions as necessary. So if you don't want the outside alarm to sound, then you can turn that off, but the inside alarms will still sound. So it's like, the joke is, why have Simply Safe when you can have Comply Dangerous, as I call it? I've also added what's called countdown mode. So when a particular sensor gets triggered, that gives 30 seconds to disarm the burglar alarm. So if I'm coming in through the front door and the magnetic door sensor gets tripped, that will start this countdown mode that will give 30 seconds to disarm the alarm. And so we have a state machine, thanks to James Brown. So we've got armed away, which is when you're away from the house, armed night, so between, I think it's 11 o'clock at night and 7 in the morning, and armed home. And there's an automatic timer automation that switches between armed home and armed night. And so there's different behaviors for different sensors in each of those states. So in armed away, the front door sensor triggers countdown mode. All the other sensors trigger the alarm immediately. So that is ultra paranoid. Armed night, the front door, the back door, the studio door, the lounge door, the conservatory and a door, cupboard under the stairs, they all trigger countdown mode. The little bedroom door sensor is disabled because I don't want the alarm going off every time I go to the loo, and all the other sensors trigger the alarm immediately. Then armed home, this is like in the daytime, so the glass break sensor and the shed motion sensor, they will trigger the alarm immediately. Because, you know, we don't want burglars smashing the glass. The cupboard under the stairs door and the conservatory inner door trigger countdown mode. The reason I've got the cupboard under the stairs door alarmed like that is that it's got the electric cupboard inside it and also the old alarm control panel that I don't use. And all the other sensors are disabled. Here's a picture of Hull 9000.
Hey,
Hi, are you all right?
I'm good. How are you?
That was really good.
I know. It was.
Oh my God, where's that been all?
I know. And the best bit for me was the introduction to the MD, which I was like, I was like, well, that's where I want to get to, but you know, how do I get there? And then she goes like, you know, so I went, okay.
To mute everybody a minute. Oh, thank you, that's better. So picture of Hull 9000.
I know. That's, well, you know, I think that they could become like a national partner, you know.
Sorry about this.
Yeah.
It's just brilliant.
Yeah.
Experience.
I know of Experian, but I haven't tried using their database. Have you?
Mr. Windley, you are not in the call you think you are. Can you please mute your microphone?
Ah. Oh, is it? Oh, well, that's really interesting, actually, that you have that comparison. You know, I've never.
Right, see if
Oh, well, that's great then. That's great.
Sorted. Sorry about that. Right. Back to where we were. So I've got this device that I've created called Hull 9000, and that is an alarm keypad with LEDs and a CCTV camera. So that's built using a Raspberry Pi 3 and just various cheap bits of kit off eBay, basically, and like one of these nice Amazon cameras with night vision. So there's some GitHub code for this. It's in Spring Boot, and that will poll the keypad for the key presses. It will control 4 LEDs, red, amber, green, and blue, and there's a buzzer inside it as well. It will allow numeric codes of up to 8 digits, not just 4, to be entered. You can press the star key to delete a digit from the code. And after entering a numeric code, you can press a letter key on the right to change the state. So A will set it to armed away, B to armed night, C to armed home, and D will disarm it. And then the hash key will show the current state with the color for each state. And it will send the entered alarm code and the requested state to Home Assistant. And Home Assistant will then send an HTTP request back if the code is correct to change the state. So now it's the fun bit. It's the live demo of the burglar alarm. So let's just get out of there a minute. So go to my configuration, because I just need to make sure that I've turned off the outside sounder, because we don't want to sound the burglar alarm outside for this, because people will think that there's burglars or something. So if I go onto my thing, I can turn off the outdoor sirens. So how do I view me on this? So I'm going to come through. Can people see okay?
Lounge door has been opened.
Open the lounge door. Let's go on to Zoom a tick. Hopefully can people see this okay? Cool. So there's the keypad. So if I press the hash key, that shows the current state, and because it's flashing green, it's in armed home mode. So I'm now going to open the door for the cupboard under the stairs. And that has started countdown mode. Mycroft just said the burglar alarm countdown has started. So that's counting down for 30 seconds. But you'll see something else happen during the last 10 seconds, because you can hear it beep at that sort. So it's increased the beep frequency in the last 10 seconds to warn you that you're running out of time. Uh-oh. Burglar alarm's being triggered. So it's flashing all the lights. And if I go into the lounge now, the burglar alarm's gone off. The lights are all flashing red. So it's like red alert. So I'm going to enter the code 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, D to disarm it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, D. Burglar alarm's been disarmed. Oh, thank goodness for that. So that is a demo of the burglar alarm. There's only one problem though, it's turned all the lights off in here. So I'm going to have to go to my conservatory, turn the lights on again. And they've all gone red. So let's change those light colours back to something other than red so it looks a bit better. For at least 2 of them anyway. Right. So that was the burglar alarm. And now we've got Big Brother is watching you. And that is the CCTV with the motion detection. I use some open source software called PyCrelCam because I was trying MotionEye, but I found that with MotionEye, the video was really quite jerky. You couldn't get that good sort of like video resolution either. This is work in progress because you can view the CCTV cameras in the feed on Home Assistant, but it's not doing notifications as yet. And what I'm also doing is I'm looking at getting AI person detection working using TensorFlow on a Pi 4. So that will detect that there's definitely a person in the video rather than it just detecting motion that could be like the dog or like the sun, the cloud going past or something. So with Home Assistant, it's quite easy to integrate CCTV cameras. So PyCrelCam gives you a motion JPEG feed, and I've set up a backdoor camera and the hall camera. So if I show you the Home Assistant CCTV page, then the back door, that just shows you what's outside the back door. So it's the side of the conservatory. And there's also the electric meter cupboard in that. And then the hall. And the really good thing about PyCrelCam, like I've said, is that the video quality is really good. So I'm just going to log on to HAL. And there's also the Mekon is the name of the camera outside the back door. So that's the live view from the back door. HAL's being a bit slow, but the video quality is pretty good. So if I can go to the list of videos for the backdoor camera, try and find one that's got the dog in it. So there's one from yesterday afternoon, which hopefully will load because it's always a bit slow with Zoom when you're trying to do videos. But there's the dog. So is anybody there? This is person detection. This is where you can like detect if somebody's phone is in the house or not in order to work out if they are present or not. So I've got OpenWRT on the wireless router, and there's an integration that you can add, which will check if somebody's device is present on the network. And that uses JSON RPC. There's a plugin that you can install on the OpenWRT router for that. And there's also Owntracks, and this is really cool. This will show you where a person is located geographically, so you can view them on a map. But unfortunately, that is broken at the moment, so I'm not going to demonstrate it. But it was working until I did. I think I did a change. Like I changed the way that I was connecting from the outside world. So instead of running like dynamic DNS, I've got a virtual private server on the internet with a static IP, and that's just using auto SSH to set up SSH tunnels between the outside world and the Home Assistant instance. So now I'm going to come on to logging and graphing all the things, and that uses InfluxDB and Grafana. So InfluxDB is a time series database, so that will record things changing with time, such as things like the electricity usage, the weather, etc. And that runs as add-ons in Docker containers on the instance of Home Assistant. So my energy is with Bulb, and they will let you, I'll let somebody else in on this, hopefully it's done it. So that will let you get your smart meter readings coming through from Samsung SmartThings, and there's an instruction article for setting that up. So I've got that set up via SmartThings, and I've also got an external webhook that will call back with meter readings every minute. I've also got what's called a derivative sensor. So because you get like the cumulative energy usage in kilowatt hours each minute. In order to work out the change of that, you use this derivative sensor, and that gives me the consumption in watts. So this is an example of the graph that I would get for the electricity usage. So I can show you that if I go to the Grafana tab. And go to energy usage. This is the current electricity usage for today. Just try and get rid of this zoom thing. Always gets in the way. That's better. So if I want to like zoom in on the electricity usage per hour, I can view that graph. And then I can change different time ranges. So I want to look at the last 12 hours or the last day or the last 2 days. And if I want to look at like a longer period of time, I could go to say the last 30 days, and then I could view my usage by day or by week or by month even. And there we've got Greta Thunberg. And the reason I've got her on that slide is that I've set up a little Raspberry Pi Zero called Greta outside on the drain pipe at the front of the house. And that is recording the temperature, the humidity, and the pressure, but also particulate concentrations. So I'm using something called Luftdaten, which is a citizen science project, which basically the idea is that individuals across the world can set up these little pollution monitors, and that'll just like transmit the particulate like concentrations every minute or so to Luftdaten, and then you can plot that on a map. So it'll just like show you, for example, for Birmingham or Sheffield, it will show you like the air pollution across that area based on sensors that people have got. So as well as publishing this data to Luftdaten from this sensor that's outside the house, I'm also pulling that back from Luftdaten using there's a Luftdaten integration with Home Assistant for pulling back the particulate concentrations. And then I've also got some REST sensors, so they make REST requests to Luftdaten, and that pulls back the temperature, humidity, and pressure. And that gives me this sort of display. So if I then go on to Grafana and go to environment, and then go on to air quality, I've got it showing the particulates for a 5-minute average, and then per hour, and then also per day. So that means that if I then sort of like zoom out, say if I want to look at the last 7 days, then that will show me data on the 24-hour average. Somebody else has got a sensor a couple of 100 meters up the road or something, but that looks to be online a lot less than mine. So if I view that and say go to like the last 30 days, then the sensor from my data since say I installed it a week or 2 ago, but there's also data coming through from their sensor up the road, but only for like 3 or 4 days or something. But it does seem like a good way to contribute to citizen science. And it's also, there's a project called Clean Air Sheffield, because I live in Sheffield, but like I work for Click that are in Birmingham. And so they've got lots of people with these sensors like across the city. So I've also got temperature and humidity monitoring set up. So you can get these AM2302 temperature and humidity sensors quite cheaply. I think they're £2 or £3 each from eBay. There's a Chinese seller that takes like, I don't know, 3 weeks or so to get them to you. And I've written another Spring Boot app that's got the GitHub link for that. And that just exposes the temperature and humidity via JSON as a REST interface. So that I've got, like, for example, for the lounge, there's an endpoint that I'm getting the temperature and humidity off. I'm getting the temperature values and then the humidity. And with Home Assistant, you can also filter the values, because I found that occasionally I was getting like really off values coming back from these sensors. It might be like 20 degrees C below what it should have been. like the previous reading. So it might have been like 20 degrees in the lounge, and then it suddenly drops to 10, but then goes straight back up to 20. So to get rid of those duff values, I've got this filter, and it's an outlier filter. So any value that is changing far too quickly just gets filtered out. So you don't get your graphs with spikes that are pretty meaningless on. And so that'll give you something like this. If I go back to Grafana and then go to back on the environment page, we've got temperature and humidity. So I can zoom in to temperature, and that's got the feed from the Met Office in green. So that'll just show like the temperature that the Met Office is recording. I can get the values from Luftdaten for outside. That looks to be about 2 or 3 degrees less than what the Met Office are recording by the look of it. I think that's because their sensor's lower down than we are, and it could just be inaccuracies in my sensor that's recording a bit low. And then the rest are like the various rooms in the house. So the lounge, the conservatory. So thankfully it's a bit warmer than it was before, and it's gone up to about 16.5 degrees. The kitchen, the big bedroom, the little bedroom, and the studio. So what do I want to do next? So I want to get like a smart thermostat, or build my own like I did in Shrewsbury about 4 years ago, and radiator valves, and then use the value from these temperature sensors to control the central heating, to save on gas and keep the house nice and warm. I want to get the motion detection and the person detection working with the CCTV cameras, and also add some more cameras throughout the house. Get the person detection to trigger the burglar alarm. So if the burglar alarm is on and the camera detects an actual person rather than just movement, then it triggers the burglar alarm. I want to refine my threat detection alerting process as well. So I don't sort of too many false alarms on the phone. And I want to log noise levels and relative gas levels from the Enviro Plus sensors in Greta outside, because currently I'm just recording the temperature and humidity and pressure and particulates. And then also to log the gas smart meter data, because the gas smart meter, although it was installed back in July, it's not transmitting data yet. So I keep chasing up Bulb to sort that. So hopefully they'll get that working before too long, and I can log my gas readings as well as the electric readings. So tips and tricks. Firstly, read the documentation. It is excellent. That's the link to the docs. Join the community. So they've got a very good active community. So for example, when I was having issues with Grafana a week or two ago, I posted a message on their forums and then posted like the resolution, which was to change the connection to InfluxDB to use post instead of get. Get used to YAML. It is really, really nice. And especially if you're used to JSON, especially with something like the AWS config files, escaped JSON is a nightmare. YAML is a dream by comparison. And then progress, not perfection. Don't expect to get this working perfectly from the word go. It's an ongoing project, but do prepare to get addicted, because it is addictive, especially when you can like control things in such a detailed, comprehensive way. And then finally, Black Lives Matter, obviously. Stay safe and be excellent to each other. So does anybody have any questions? Like, feel free to unmute yourselves and ask questions.
Hi, it's Philip Jones. I've got a question.
Yeah.
So I've been using OpenHAB for a few years, but I'm very much an amateur techie. I don't program for my job. And I've really struggled. So the rest of the family just thinks of OpenHAB as the system which fails to turn the heating on in the morning. And I found that support people are very enthusiastic, but work at a different level. So when you're talking about YAML and Python, I'm thinking this might be more suited to somebody who's not an uber geek. And just wondering if you evaluated OpenHAB to compare with, with the system you are using now, and if you've got any points of comparison.
I did actually. So I think it must have been about 5 or so years ago, I was looking at OpenHab, but I just found it had a very steep learning curve, and I didn't really have the time to proceed with it. So I think my experiences were quite similar to yours. And then when I found Home Assistant and found that it would set up things for you straight out of the box without you needing to code anything, such as like Philips Hue lights, Google Cast, etc., then I just went with that because I could, the learning curve was a lot less steep, and I could just see things working straight away.
That sounds really really positive. And I was also, sorry, another question. I don't want to dominate this, but I'm really interested in what you're doing with heating.
Yeah.
I've got a Z-Wave thermostat and boiler controller, and that's been a headache right from the start. I mean, Z-Wave is complicated, but I'm really fascinated by what you did building your own thermostat. And did you build your own radiator controllers as well?
It was literally just a Pi 3 with a relay board attached to it, and the boiler was one of these old back boilers, and the controller was like literally just turning on the boiler itself, and then the valve that switched between hot water and heating. And then I just had one of those cheap AM2302 sensors in the lounge that would turn the heating on and off based on the temperature. So it was really quite trivial compared to the sort of stuff that I'm doing now. But there's definitely a Z-Wave integration into Home Assistant.
Yeah.
So that, I think that would probably be something that you could investigate.
Yeah, it sounds like a bit of experimentation before making the jump is probably the way to go.
Yeah. I mean, also the nice thing is that it's literally just a question of like downloading this image and flashing it onto an SD card to get it up and running. So
I could swap them over.
yeah. So you don't need to like go through pages and pages of like command line installation to get something up and running. It's literally just flash it onto the card, fire it up, go to Home Assistant :8123 in a browser, and it'll just take you through that nice onboarding process, and then Bob's your uncle, it's working.
That's great, thank you.
That's okay. Are there any other questions, please?
Hey, Ruth.
Hi.
Just wondering, is there any chance you can put the slides on like G Drive or something?
Absolutely, yes. So I shall do that after the talk.
That'd be awesome. Thanks very much.
That's okay. I've got the config in GitHub, but for security reasons, I'm not going to be sharing that as yet because it'll just give insight into how the burglar alarm works.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Cool.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's okay. Anybody else? Any other questions at this stage? So if there aren't any other questions, then that's my contact details, and likewise for Click Travel. And thank you for listening.